April 12, 1944. 26,000 feet above Brunswick, Germany. The sky was a trembling sheet of aluminum. Hundreds of aircraft glinted in the pale morning light, silver dots crawling across the heavens like a metallic swarm. Below them, the smoke-streaked city of Brunswick burned from the previous wave. Above them, the contrails twisted and merged into long white scars. Inside a Messerschmitt Bf-109G, Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Weber gripped the stick tighter, his gloved hands slick with sweat despite the freezing air. His canopy rattled as he broke through a formation's outer edge, the roar of his Daimler-Benz engine echoing in his skull. "Gott im Himmel!" he muttered, eyes wide. Ahead, cutting through the haze, were giants, bombers unlike anything he had seen. The aircraft were massive, gleaming beasts that seemed to ignore the laws of physics. 4 engines each, but even those couldn't explain their size. Weber had faced B-17s and B-24s before. Sturdy, stubborn machines that could take punishment, but these were different. "Command, this is Yellow 2, he crackled into his radio. They're enormous, larger than fortresses. I can see one climbing to 30,000 feet. Static. Then a voice. "Repeat, Yellow 2? I said they're bigger than B-17s. What are these things?" He pulled closer, his prop wash buffeting his wings. For a split second, through the shimmering exhaust haze, he could see one of the bombers in full, the Boeing B-29 Superfortress. It looked like a silver whale in the sky. Long fuselage, pressurized compartments, gun turrets that moved like eyes tracking predators. The sunlight shimmered off its smooth, seamless skin. Weber could see the nose, a glass bubble enclosing men who seemed to work in shirt sleeves, not heavy flight suits. He fired a short burst, the tracers stitched toward the giant, but they seemed to vanish into the hull. The gunner turret spun, impossibly fast, and answered with a stream of .50 caliber rounds that chewed the air near Weber's cockpit. He dove, the canopy whistling as the air screamed past. He couldn't stop staring. Inside that aircraft, he could see comfort, control, confidence, things no Luftwaffe pilot knew at 26,000 feet over a burning homeland. And as he pulled away, the thought formed unbidden. How could they afford to fly fortresses that carried luxury instead of just survival? Weber's squadron reformed below the formation. The B-29s thundered on, high and unbothered. From the ground, they must have looked like moving cities. And in a way they were. Because inside those American bombers, those impossible machines, the air crews had things that sounded like fiction to Axis ears. Pressurized cabins, reclining seats, even cold drinks and ice cream machines. The German pilots couldn't believe it, and soon neither would the rest of the world. The hum inside the B-29 Enola's shadow was constant. A steady vibration through the aluminum ribs, a metallic heartbeat. But to Captain Jack Hawk Henderson, it was the sound of security. Unlike the B-17s he had flown in training, the cabin around him wasn't a freezing wind tunnel. The air was warm, dry, and steady. "Cabin pressure's holding," his flight engineer, Sergeant Miles Brooks, reported, tapping a gauge that glowed softly under the dim red lights. "Feels like a damn hotel in here, Captain." "That's the point, Brooks," Henderson grinned, lifting his oxygen mask to take a deep breath of the filtered air. "Let the Germans freeze while we keep thinking straight." The B-29's interior was unlike any bomber before it. The pressurized crew compartments, fore and aft, were connected by a narrow tunnel that ran above the bomb bay, allowing crewmen to crawl between sections even at 30,000 feet. No more frost-bitten gunners, no more oxygen masks freezing solid. Behind Henderson, the navigator's table was cluttered with maps, pencils, and a steaming cup of coffee. Actual coffee brewed mid-flight. Nearby, a radio operator tuned into Allied command frequencies, his headphones crackling softly. And toward the rear, in a small, compartmentalized section near the gunnery controls, Brooks was doing something that would have seemed absurd to any Luftwaffe pilot. He was making ice cream. The machine wasn't much, a compact experimental cooler unit designed to test long-range refrigeration on pressurized aircraft. But it worked. The airmen swore by it. "You know, I told my girl back home about this," Brooks said, laughing. "Didn't believe me. Said, you're bombing Germany and eating dessert at the same time?" From the intercom, a gunner's voice broke through. "Tail to cockpit. Enemy fighters below. Looks like 109s. Coming in fast." Henderson adjusted his oxygen mask, eyes narrowing, as he peered through the plexiglass nose. "All right, boys, keep it steady. Let the remote turrets do their job." The B-29's central fire control system was revolutionary. Instead of manning every gun manually, the crew controlled multiple turrets remotely via sighting stations. Electric servos moved the guns faster than any human could crank. From his gunner's seat, Corporal Vargas watched the tracers streak upward toward the incoming Messerschmitts. He didn't even flinch. His hands danced over the controls as the tail and upper turrets synchronized, weaving a web of fire that reached out like lightning. "Got one! He's breaking off!" Vargas shouted. Outside, Lieutenant Weber saw the silver machine shrug off the attack like an armored dragon. He peeled away, shaken. Inside, the crew of the Enola's Shadow steadied themselves. Coffee sloshed, a spoon clinked in a tin bowl, and Brooks huckled, wiping ice cream from his thumb. "Still tastes better than the rations," he said. What Weber and his comrades never realized was that the luxury wasn't for show. It was a weapon in itself. The B-29's comfort meant its crews could fly higher, longer, and think clearer. Where German crews fought the elements, American crews fought the enemy. The difference was industrial power and the unshakable belief that morale and machinery went hand in hand. But even among the Luftwaffe, whispers spread fast. Some called the American bombers palaces in the sky. Others thought propaganda. Then came the first wreck, a downed B-29, its twisted fuselage a treasure trove of secrets. And when the German engineers opened it, they hardly believed what they saw inside. June 7th, 1944, somewhere near Leipzig, Germany. The wreck lay half buried in a muddy field, steam rising from its torn fuselage. Smoke still drifted from the broken wings where the massive Wright 3350 engines had torn free on impact. Around the site, Luftwaffe engineers and Wehrmacht soldiers picked through the debris, their boots crunching on twisted aluminum and blackened glass. Oberstleutnant Hans Gruner, head of the Luftwaffe's Technical Recovery Unit, approached slowly. He'd seen dozens of downed B-17s and Liberators, but nothing like this. "Mein Gott," he whispered as he stepped into what was once the pressurized forward cabin. The smell of scorched insulation and spilled hydraulic fluid filled the air. His flashlight beam cut through the haze, illuminating smooth aluminum panels, not riveted but flush, seamless, aerodynamic in a way German design hadn't yet achieved. "Sir," called one of his engineers, kneeling beside a shattered control column, "you need to see this." Gruner crouched, brushing away debris. The instrument panel still glowed faintly, powered by residual charge. The fire control system, compact, electric, interconnected, was unlike anything they'd seen. He reached toward a small glass dome protruding from the fuselage's side. Remote targeting optics, the engineer explained, controlled from inside, not manned. They fight by camera. Gruner's brow furrowed. And this? He pointed to an insulated pipe running along the cabin wall, curving toward the rear. Refrigeration unit, the engineer said slowly. It appears to have kept food cool. He pulled open a small compartment. Inside, shattered glass, twisted metal, and something else. Ice crystals clung to a small metal bowl.
Frozen cream, the engineer said after a pause, bewildered. Sir, they had ice cream up here. Gruner stared in disbelief. Around him, the remains of a once flying fortress whispered of a different world, a world of comfort and abundance, even at the edge of death. These Americans, he muttered. They fly at the edge of the stratosphere, eat dessert, and control their guns by wire. How are we to fight this? He straightened and surveyed the wreck. The B-29 wasn't just an aircraft. It was a message, a technological declaration of war on an industrial level Germany could no longer match. From the blackened wreckage, they salvaged pieces. The pressurization system, the central fire control computer, fragments of the turret servos. Each part was crated and sent to Berlin for study. When Luftwaffe engineers presented their report to Göring weeks later, it caused stunned silence. The Americans have built an aircraft we cannot reach, one scientist said. And inside it, they live as if on the ground. They no longer suffer the air, the cold, the strain. They have turned war into engineering comfort. Göring scowled, slamming a fist on the table. Luxury in war is decadence, he barked. But in private, the engineers disagreed. They saw it for what it was, a symbol of industrial might and morale. The Germans could not imagine such resources, factories turning out machines so advanced that the crews inside could afford to think of meals, not just survival. And across the Atlantic, those very crews prepared for something even greater, a mission that would carry their palaces in the sky farther than anyone had ever flown before. The tropical air shimmered with heat, carrying the smell of oil, salt, and cordite. On the coral airstrip, a line of B-29 Superfortresses stood ready, their wings casting long shadows across the tarmac. The rising sun glinted off their polished aluminum skins, reflecting the calm before another storm over the Pacific. Captain Jack Hawk Henderson, now a squadron leader, climbed the ladder into his aircraft, the Silver Ghost. The interior was as immaculate as any machine could be after months of war. Cramped, yes, but astonishingly civilized. He ducked into the forward pressurized cabin. His bombardier, Lieutenant Frank Collier, was checking the Norden sight, humming softly. The radio operator handed Henderson a mug of coffee, brewed fresh from the small galley unit bolted to the bulkhead. Outside, ground crews moved with mechanical precision, loading the bomb bays with high explosives bound for Tokyo, a city still untouched by the firestorms that would soon follow. As Henderson adjusted his flight gloves, his co-pilot, Lieutenant Sam Porter, grinned. "Hard to believe we've come this far, huh? From Kansas cornfields to flying ice cream parlors over Japan?" Henderson chuckled. "Don't let command hear you call it that." But everyone knew the joke. The B-29's reputation had spread, even among Allied pilots, as a flying hotel. Pressurized comfort, heated cabins, efficient ventilation, food warmers, and yes, that famous ice cream machine that rotated out among crews like a morale booster. It wasn't arrogance. It was strategy. Every comfort meant clearer thinking. Every degree of warmth preserved focus. In 12-hour missions over the endless Pacific, that difference meant life or death. At 7 a.m., engines roared to life. 4 massive Wright R-3350 duplex Cyclones per aircraft, spitting blue flame as they rumbled across the airfield. The sound rolled like thunder over the island, echoing off the mountains. From the ground, it looked like the future itself taking off. High above, formation tightened. 40 aircraft spread across the sky, contrails merging into one pale river. Henderson leveled off at 31,000 feet. The crew settled in, coffee cups floating lightly in their holders, jackets unzipped, and the hum of oxygen compressors steady and reassuring. "Target Musashino Aircraft Plant," came the order through the radio. "Weather clear. Proceed as planned." Below them, the ocean stretched forever. No fighters, no flak, only sky. In those moments, Henderson felt the contrast most sharply. He had read reports from Europe of German aces who couldn't believe such aircraft existed, men like Karl-Heinz Weber, who had fought in frozen cockpits, breath frosting on their goggles, hearts pounding from thin air and exhaustion. And here he was, thousands of miles from home, sipping coffee while a pressurized cabin and remote turrets did the heavy lifting. The Americans had done something no one else could, not just build bigger, but build smarter. The B-29 wasn't only a bomber. It was a declaration that the United States could outthink, outbuild, and outlast any enemy. Hours later, as the Silver Ghost turned toward the Japanese coast, Henderson looked down through the glass nose. The city below was waking up, unaware of what was coming. "Bomb doors open," he said quietly. As the mechanism whirred and the Pacific sunlight spilled into the bomb bay, he couldn't help but think of how far human ingenuity had come and how terrifyingly far it was willing to go. The first bombs fell like silent punctuation marks. Then came the sound, a deep, rolling thunder that reached even into the pressurized cabin of the Silver Ghost. Below, the Musashino aircraft plant erupted in orange and black, plumes rising through the clouds like pillars of smoke from some industrial apocalypse. Inside the bomber, Captain Henderson's crew worked in practiced silence. Instruments glowed, dials quivered, and the air was calm. They had trained for this exact moment, long hours in simulated flights, endless briefings on precision bombing, mechanical failures and navigation drills. But what struck Henderson most was the peace of it. It didn't feel like the chaos of war. It felt like a system executing flawlessly, like the culmination of design, discipline, and wealth all converging at 30,000 feet. When the bombs hit their mark, Henderson didn't cheer. He only said, "Target struck," and banked the aircraft gently back toward Saipan. The Pacific stretched below, silent and endless. For the Germans who had seen the wrecks, the B-29 represented an impossible leap, a machine so advanced it bordered on science fiction. For the Japanese defenders watching the contrails cross the skies above Tokyo, it was something else entirely. Inevitability. By 1945, the B-29 had become the face of American industrial supremacy. Its range, its altitude, its comfort, all were the byproducts of a nation that had turned assembly lines into engines of destiny. German engineers had once built aircraft with elegance and precision, but always with scarcity in mind. Rationed aluminum, limited fuel, desperate improvisation. American factories, meanwhile, operated at a scale the Axis couldn't comprehend. The luxury of a coffee machine or ice cream unit wasn't wasteful. It was proof that the United States could afford it. And that psychological blow, that sense of being outbuilt, out-resourced, outplanned, crushed morale as effectively as any bomb. Months later, as news of the atomic missions reached Berlin's surviving officers, men like Lieutenant Karl-Heinz Weber sat in silence. The B-29s had carried the ultimate weapon, not just in their bomb bays, but in their very design. Comfort, precision, abundance, these were the traits of a nation that had mastered both war and peace at once. Weber remembered his first sight of those giants, gleaming shapes in the cold sky over Brunswick, and realized they had been omens. They had heralded the end. The B-29 didn't just win the air war, it announced a new world, one where technology and resources decided fate more than courage or skill. In time, the same principles that gave those bombers their comfort would give rise to passenger jets, global air travel, and the modern age of aviation. But for the men who first faced them, the Luftwaffe pilots staring up in disbelief, the B-29 would always remain a ghostly symbol of what they could never reach, a flying fortress where men ate ice cream and drank coffee at 30,000 feet, while empires crumbled below.